Hello, semester 8 students at the Faculty of Languages, English department. Our course is about translation theories and practice. This course is designed for 8th semester students, and this is the final course related to translation studies, because students, when they started their courses, they have about 4 or 5 courses related to translation, and this is the final one, and it is more or less theoretical rather than practice, but in this one we are going to combine theory with practice. Translation theory and practice, as hence the name, is about a number of topics. The first one, in part 1, we are dealing with approaches to text types. Part 2, discourse parameters or register. And part 3, what is the text linguistics, the 7 standards of textuality. Actually, this course is designed for students who are already have something and knowledge about translation in general, and also about how to deal with the theory and how to put theory into practice while translating texts from unrelated languages such as English and Arabic. In previous courses, we concentrate on what we call micro level. Micro level, that's we have a comparison between 2 languages, 2 cultures, the structure of the language. We are talking about the meaning, how to convey the meaning. In this course, which is the final one for 8th semester students, actually, we are dealing with macro level. What does this mean? We are dealing with hidden issues about translation. These issues is very important in dealing with translation, and it is very they are very important dealing with translation, and translators have to take care of the macro level, the professional translators. Why? Because these issues are hidden, and a person who is not qualified or he didn't take any course in translation study cannot deal with them. So we are dealing with macro level, with the abstract things that can be taken from the translation. So we are going to start with approaches, and I'd like here to thank Mr. Nafat Tashani for providing the PowerPoint. We start with text type. Let me give a brief idea. So what do you mean by macro level when you are talking about something abstract? Of course, usually when we translate words, and of course translation is about meaning. In the first one, when we say text type, suppose I'm going to give the student a text, and the students try to translate the text. That's fine, and they concentrate on the meaning, the structure, the style, but they forget something important. It is the type of the text they are translating. The question is, what is the type of text? In Arabic, we say type namatun nas. They should know the type of the text before starting translating the text, before they start translating the text. So the type is very important. So we'll deal with this. And we are going to talk about different types and how could we convey the source text type into the target text. This is part one. In part two, discourse parameters. The interpersonal communication, the style you are using, the formality of the text, the style of the text. If you have a text in front of you, you're just going to translate it like that haphazardly? No, you should know the discourse parameters, the level of the text. We have 3 discourse parameters. We are going to deal with them: field, tenor, and mode. That's why I'm saying macro. So you should know the field of the text. In Arabic we say مجال النص. The tenor of the text. The tenor, a level of formality of the text. And 3, the mode of the text. So we have here to know, before dealing with the text, before the translation of the text or rendering the text, we have to know these 3 important discourse parameters of field, tenor, and mode. And this is part 2. The final part, part 3, which is what is text linguistics. We are going to deal with a new theory in this field. It is actually related to language or to linguistics, but during the 90s, Hatem and Mason, they tried to take something from this theory and apply it to translation. So we are going to deal with the 7 standards of textuality. This means, what is a text? What is a text? The text linguistics, or the standard of textuality, or this is by Bjorn Ressler. What do they say? They say a text must fulfill 7 standards of textuality. If any text does not fulfill these 7, is not considered a text, and we call it non-text. So during our translation, we have to identify these 7 standards, and we have to use the source text standard, and we have to convey them to the target text. And here we are faithful to what is translation? Translation is about faithfulness. A translator, if he is not faithful, there's nothing called translation. Let us start with part 1. Part 1, approaches to text types, text typological model. We start with the text typological model, and here the brief introduction. Much of the theoretical discussion of translation has revolved around the idea of equivalence with the original text. That's the common practice. That's the issue of the day in translation, that our main aim is to achieve what? Equivalence. At-takafu. We don't have sameness. Nothing identical. By the way, this equivalence, or this word, is the least defined by translators. We don't have a fixed or a perfect definition for equivalence. But scholars, they agree that in translation we seek equivalence between languages. As you know, translation is not about language, it's about other things, it's about culture. It's not only language, we deal with culture. We deal with figurative language, we deal with a lot of things. So, to this end, theoreticians strive to find appropriate theories and methods of translation to help translators doing their job. One of the problems of translation theories is the abundance of literature about translation. Each scholar or writer or author has his or her own ideas or experience, and then he writes a book or an article and saying this is the proper way, this is how to translate, this is how to deal with the problems and so on. But nothing is taken for granted, and we don't have a fixed theory in translation and we say, oh, this is the best or this is the worst. Many theories, models, and approaches have been proposed and subjected to heated debate among theoreticians. As I said, everyone tries to convince the other that his theory is the best. And his process of transferring is the best. Okay? Introduction. In this regard, okay, that's the saying, different translation models and approaches have sought to eradicate translational misunderstanding, yet each of them has engendered more controversies than solving existing ones. This is the controversy about translation and the abundance of the literature makes the translator all the time worried. Which theory should I take? Which approach can I use? What can I do with this, with that? Oh, I'll go for this author, for that author. And this confusion makes the translator worried, and sometimes he lost among these theories of translation. Fine. Introduction. We are talking about first part about text typology. Text typology seeks to group text into categories and what? And types. We try to find a way to have some fixed types and used in translation. And when any translator, first of all, when he reads the text, he knows the type first, and then the process. Not the process, then the type. Okay? Text typology. What does this mean? It aims at identifying and describing linguistic and conceptual features that texts belonging to a particular group have in common. And this is true. How could we classify text into groups, into types? So we classify them according to what they have in common. And here, when we talk about text type, people may think that we are talking about the topic of the text. موضوع النص. No. We don't deal with that now. Now we are dealing with the type of the text. نمط النص, not the topic of the text. One of the characteristics of text is its resemblance to or difference from other texts. This is true. When we put text into groups, what does this mean? As we said here, they have something in common. So texts are different texts. They the texts that have the same characteristic of the other one, we put them in one group and another one in another group, and we try to find a way how to group these texts, and this is our main concern. Text typology, how is it given that each text is unique, that some texts are treated as the same? Bill asked this very important question. Okay? In 1991, in his book called Translation and Translating, how is it given that each text is unique, that some texts are treated as the same? Now, non-professional translators, they treat texts as the same. They are looking for equivalence for the meaning, and that's it. But this is not the case. Each text is unique or has its own characteristics. So each text must be treated separately, not as Bill is a question. How is it given that each text is unique, that some texts are treated as the same? So it is not possible to treat every text when we translate them in a similar way. No. We have to know the type of the text, and then we find the method, the approach, the theory that is suitable for this text to be translated. Okay? So treatment, we can't treat every text the same. No, different text. For instance, scientific text, very simple, easy, that we can translate it literally. Literary text, adabi, no? We need a different approach. The key concept for answering such question is that of a text. This is Bell as well. He answers this question. This is his answer, by the way. Yeah? He asks and answers the question at the same time. Is that of a text type token relationship. Each individual text is a token. Token means type. A realization of some ideal type which underlines it. So each text is unique, means each text has its own characteristics, features, style, the style of the text, the meaning, the style, the structure of the text. So how come that translators treat all texts as the same, whereas texts are different from each other? So Bill is asking for a special treatment. Every text should have a special treatment by the translator. That's the main issue. Mr. Neff has a nice here figure like text typology, token, type, token, token. Each type has tokens or subtypes. So we have the main type, and then we have the subtype, and each text type must be treated differently from any other text type. Text typology. So we have type, text 1, text 2, text 3, and 4. The Arab scholars, and this is important, and we have to tell our students that Arabs were the pioneers in the field of translation. And Europe has benefited a lot from the translations of the Arabs of the Greek and Latin books. Fine. Arab scholars Al-Jahab had predicted the emergence of text typology, typological model, when he states that the translation, this is Al-Jahab translated from Arabic into English, the translation should know the structure of the text, behaviors of the people, and their way of understanding each other before translating the text, hundreds of years ago. Then, in the 20th century, Biogra and Dressler wrote a book. Both of them, have written a book called Introduction to Text Linguistics, I think in 1981. Define text typology as a set of heuristics for producing, predicting, and processing textual occurrences, and hence acts as a prominent determiner of efficiency, effectiveness, and appropriateness. So we have a set of characteristics must be applied for producing what? Predicting and processing. Translation is a process. Textual occurrences, the textual occurrences, and hence acts as a prominent determiner. And we take these as a guideline, as something very important of efficiency, effectiveness, and appropriateness. So the text, the translated text, must be efficient, effective, and also conveys the meaning of the original in an adequate way or in an appropriate way. Katharina Ries, a German scholar, is the one who actually in the 20th century predicted in her article in a conference about the emergence of text types. Katharina Ries notes that the text type is an important concept for translation quality assessment. She believes that one can be in a position to judge a translation fairly only when one is able to establish some factors, among which is the determination of the kind of text the original represents in terms of text type and text variety. That's the important thing here. The kind of text the original represents in terms of text type and text variety. Variety means different texts, different kinds of texts. So Katharina Ries told us that we need to do something about text type, and we have to identify text type before translating any text. Okay, to sum up, broadly speaking, text typology aims at grouping text into categories and types and at identifying and describing linguistic and conceptual features that texts belong to a particular group have in common. So there is a need to group texts, to put them under a name, and because all texts which have something in common, the structure, meaning, especially text typology, actually there are a lot of after Katharina Ries, there are a lot of attempts to identify exactly what's text types. Some said that okay, the functional typology. They say, okay, let us take the field, موضوع النص. Let's take the field of the text as a type. So we end up with hundreds of topics. So this is failed because many. We end up with legal, scientific, many texts, music, any kind of text. Then there came the functional typology. Okay. This is the attempt number one, based on what? On the text type. The formal typology. They said and failed because we end up with hundreds of texts, because they said that the type of text is the topic. Then we come the functional typology. Recently, this is led by Newmark, and this group said, okay, let us take the philosopher Buhler's functions of language. We are going to take Buhler in 1965 divided language into three functions. That language must have three functions. Okay? The expressive function, okay, and the informative function, which is the language, and finally the provocative function. What is the expressive functions? That's the author. When you write a text, you express your feelings, your ideas. So language, who is the person? The author tries to express himself and his idea regardless of the audience. No, he is dealing with the ideas that he or she believes in. And he has the right to ignore the audience, for instance. Unlike translator, no. Translator, the important thing is to please the audience. To what? To please the audience. And if the audience happy, so this is an indication that his translation is okay. But in expressive, when the author express his feelings, maybe it can be regardless of the author. Informative, they said that the text must be informative. Here we have to differentiate between two important things: meaningfulness and informativeness. The text is meaningful. If you have a text in front of you, for example, let us take a sentence. The sea is water. What's wrong with that? The sea is water. That's fine. Grammatically okay. Meaning is fine, but not informative, because nothing is there. What is the new? What is important about the sea? We know that. So this text is meaningful, but not what? So informative must carry new information. Bragg School said that, what is a sentence according to Bragg School? They said, a sentence must convey two important things: theme and rhyme. What is theme? The old information, and rhyme, the new information. That's a text. A text must have old and new information. Vocative text, this is related to the audience. When the author sometimes speculates on the audience, and he or she says, okay, I know, I am going to write a story, I know the audience, what they like, what kind of stories they like. So here, this is on the side of the audience. And as I said before, the author can ignore the audience, but also the audience are part of this circle. So we have the audience, the the author, the text, and the audience. Some scholars said, okay, we'll take the functions of language and we can say we have 3 text types. We have 3 text types: the expressive, the informative, the vocative. Okay, this is a very good achievement. In the first one, in the formal typology, we have hundreds of text types, but now we have 3. That's good. But how could we differentiate between them? What is the criteria that can be used, or criterion that can be used between these? What are the criteria that can be differentiate between these 3? So also this attempt failed. So we end up with a new attempt, appeared in 1990 by Hatem and Mason, and they take something from, as I said, from text linguistics, and they say that we have to differentiate texts according to their structures. The structure of the text identifies its type. And this one, here it becomes easy. When you have a text in front of you and you read it, you say, oh, I think this structure of the text, this type, structure of the, and they end up with 3 main text types. I'm not going to talk about them now. And okay, we have to see first, okay? Text typological model. The surface text, text type, situation of occurrence, as we said before, stored knowledge patterns, and the textual what? Word. The surface of the text, the grammar, and so on. Then a situation of occurrence, this is important. The situation when we have a text, actually the important thing that we couldn't take the text out of its environment. You cannot translate a text and leave the environment. No, you have to translate the text with the environment as well. The situation of occurrence. And also the relation, the textual word, the relation between texts. And also the stored knowledge and patterns and matter of the text. So, environment, or what we call the context. The context, we have a linguistic context, by the way. When we say context, we are talking about the linguistic context, the relationship between words in a sentence or in a text, either vertically or horizontally in a text. But here we are dealing with co-text. What is co-text? The context outside the text, the environment. If you translate the text out of its environment, it's not a good translation. So you have to be careful. So here we have to take care of the situation of occurrence. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day by Shakespeare? Why? Why Shakespeare says summer? Because the best season in Britain. And if we translate it here, it will give a negative meaning. So we have to change the environment from summer to spring. Okay? To please the audience. Shall I compare thee to a spring's day? Someone said, okay, how come that you change spring into summer into spring? I think I do not change anything. I change the function only. So this is what we call functional translation. You don't need to write the same word, but you have to have another word which gives the same function of the word in the source text. So that's what we call the situation of occurrence. Okay. Text typological model. Hatem and Mason, 1990, page 140. By the way, they have a very important book called Discourse and the Translator. Discourse and the Translator. It's a bit difficult for maybe for newly graduate students, need a lot of because it is a bit complicated, but it's one of the best books that you can read about text typology. The first, and then have other books, Hatem and Mason together, maybe more or less about text typology and other translational issues. A conceptual framework which enables us to classify text in terms of communicative intentions, serving an overall rhetorical purpose. This is one of the important things that we have to take into consideration when we translate the type of text. A conceptual framework which enables us to classify. We classify texts, تصنيف, in terms of communicative intention. Each text has a communicative intention. What is the intention of this text? What is the intention of that text? What's this text is going to convey to the audience? Serving an overall rhetorical purpose. Rhetorical purpose, from rhetoric, البلاغة, غرض بلاغي, rhetorical purpose. Here is this is the key which used to identify text typology, and then Hatem and Mason called their attempt of finding proper text typology, they called them the rhetorical typology. The rhetorical typology. So now we have three attempts. The first, the formal one, failed. The functional typology failed, and this is the new one which we are going to deal with in details, because the last one, as I said before, it is very convincing. Why? Because it is easy for a person to identify a text. How? Through its type. You look at the type of the text. You look at the structure of the text, and then you know the type of the text. An overview of a variety of different approaches, attempting to classify text into some major categories and types. Okay, I just explained that to you. Reese, this is the first one. This is the formal typology. So they said, okay, we text type, journalistic, religious, poetic, technical, sports, whatever. So, and these types as what? Field of discourses. They take the field of discourse and موضوع النص, and they said, okay, which is field? We call it field, not type. Now we are dealing with type, but they are dealing with field. As I said, they end up with hundreds of topics, and this is failed. Bugra and Dressler, 1981. Okay, this is the book. It is the book called An Introduction to Text Linguistics. They believe that text types are supposed supposed to perform specific and intended functions, and in so doing, contribute to the process of human and social communication. Okay? They follow this line of thought because they view text types as a linguistic product. They view text type as what? As a linguistic product. Are supposed to perform specific and intended what functions. Each text has a function, وظيفة. What is the intention of this text? What is the function of the text? And here we need to identify what, because they view text, they view text types as a linguistic product. Another scholar actually called Verlich, 1967, Dominant Contextual Focus, another attempt. He explains this notion by saying that text distinctively correlate with the contextual factors in a communication situation. These factors draw the addressees, the audience, متلقي, attention only on specific factors and circumstances from the whole set of factors. This scholar tries to do something, but I think also not very clear what he's saying about these factors. What are these factors? We don't know what the kind of factors. Okay, so let us move. Okay, let us move to approaches to text typology. These are the ones I have already explained to you. Text typology, formal, functional, and rhetorical. I said formal, based on fields, and they failed because we end up with many fields without any kind of differentiation. We don't know how to differentiate between these texts. The other, they took Bohler's theory about language, the professor, philosopher Bohler, who divided the language into three functions: the expressive, the formative, and the evocative. And this is our main concern. We are going to deal with the rhetorical. Why? Why rhetoric? Because rhetoric related to the structure. So we can identify the text when we read it. I say, okay, this one, this text type is so, this one is so and so. So this is very important and very practical. Very practical, because something in front of you, you can deal with it. So three functions on text, three attempts, two failed, and the last one still exists, and we are going to deal with it in details. The formal, I explained this to you. It draws heavily on the study of register. It associates text typology with the prevailing register, distinction between text types like institutional, technical, literary, criticism. The number of types is not definite, as I said, because they take just the field, موضوع النص, text type. And there is a vagueness about the meaning of concepts such as literary, technical, or scientific. How can we differentiate between these three? If we talk about text type, such as traits means types. Traits that can be said to belong to one of the types can be found in another, of course. Thus, content, the basis of formal typology categorization, cannot act as an adequate discriminator between texts. We cannot discriminate between texts. We have a lot of topics. What is the difference between technical, literary, and scientific? Just the name. They said this is literary, this is technical, this is what about other factors? no, nothing. So here we have a kind of overlapping between the text, and this one failed. This one what? Failed. Okay, let me check this here. Okay, can be listed the 3 typologies that in preferred text type according to return, no, left here, okay. So here we have, let me, yes, the function typology, okay, formatted, where is the function of typological model? Criticism. One advantage of functional typology is that it makes it possible to list each text type under what? Function, yes. However, it overlooks how these functions are rhetorically represented in the text. What do we mean by rhetorically represented? What is the difference? What is the structure? If you have scientific, do you have a certain structure? Or if you have literary, what is the structure? So this is the problem with the functional what typology. I think we don't deal with functional typology. Sorry, I left this one. The functionality, the functional typological model. Before that, the formal typology. Okay. Now we come to the functional typological model. Proponents, supporters of this type, example, Newmark 8188, divide text according to Buhler's 1965, as I told you, the main function of language, the expressive, the informative, and the vocative. I think it's very clear. The functional typological model, the expressive type, as I said, consists of the feeling of the author, producer, regardless of any response. The informative type concerns the factors of a topic, such as reported ideas or theories. The vocative is concerned with the readership or the addressee. What is the reaction of the audience towards the? If I wrote a story and then I'd like to see the reaction of the audience. So that's will be good for me and also for the book. Okay. The functional typological model, criticism. One advantage of functional typology is that it makes it possible to list each type under a function. Okay, that's good. We have 3 instead of 100. However, it overlooks these functions. However, it overlooks how these functions are rhetorically represented in the text. And now we have to stop here for the next lecture. Thank you for listening, and all please, semester 8 students, Faculty of Languages, you have to take care that these lectures cannot be repeated again. This is part of your curriculum, and you have to look at them, and you might see them. If you are not following in the channel, you can follow them in YouTube. Thank you very much.